God afton och shalom vänner. Profetisk uppdatering 4 februari 2024. Bakom mig ser ni en regnig och våt och dyster bild. Och den är från Sisjön häromdagen när vi var ute och gick i duggregn. Och det regnade mer än så tidvis. Men vi var ute och dels för att få motion och framförallt för att leta efter en lappuggla som hade setts mellan Sisjön och Oxsjön. Vi lyckades inte hitta den, trots att vi var flera som letade, fågelskådare på plats. Men vi hoppas få nya chanser. Jag ska inte säga så mycket här. Jag ska visa en video, uppdatering från CBN News. Där vi får veta bland annat att Israel har besegrat Hamas fäste i Khan Yunis och går mot nästa mål. Terrorister i Rafah ska besegras. Detta är vad som pågår. Det är inte den bild som vi får av mainstream media, så det är viktigt att vi får veta sanningen. Och jag skulle vilja säga att en del av världens faktiskt dåraktiga ledare pratar om att erkänna en palestinsk stat och vill tvinga fram en tvåstatslösning av Israel. Och hur sjukt är inte det efter det som har hänt? Majoriteten så kallade palestinier, alltså araber, är hjärntvättade med hat och hot mot Israel. Och dessa terrorister, nazister, har aldrig erkänt Israel som judarnas hemland, kommer inte att göra det. Och de vill inte ens ha en tvåstatslösning, för de vill utplåna judarna och Israel. Och det här är ju på deras program som vi vet, som Yasser Arafat också på den tiden och PLO uttalade. Inget nytt under solen, som kung Salomo uttryckte det i predikaren i Bibeln. Israel har varit judarnas hemland i ungefär 1900 år, 1900 år före islam och dess lögner ens fanns på kartan. Och efter år 70 började förskingringen av judarna och olika världsmakter styrde över området, men det har aldrig varit ett arabiskt land. Och Guds löften att samla sitt folk tillbaka igen är uppfyllt och pågår fortfarande. I den här videon får vi se mödrar, mammor till IDF-soldater som demonstrerar utanför USAs ambassad i Jerusalem och ber USA om fortsatt stöd för att besegra Hamas i det krig som tvingats på Israel och som handlar om Israels överlevnad. Det mesta av den humanitära hjälpen går till Hamas och stärker dem i sin terror, säger dessa mammor. Hamas måste först tvingas ned och sen kan vi förhandla. Det fungerar inte åt andra hållet och USA behöver förstå det, är deras budskap. Gisslan måste befrias. Den svenska texten här på videon är något bristfällig ibland, men jag hoppas att det ändå går att förstå det som sägs i stora drag. Men det är alltså detta som de här mammorna säger, det är att först måste Hamas tvingas ned, sen kan vi förhandla. Det går inte åt andra hållet. Och vad kan man säga om detta? Ja, varför pressar inte världens ledare Hamas? Det är ju det de borde verkligen engagera sig i. Och vi kan konstatera att den här världen är sjuk och full av själviskhet och ondska. Vänsterideologin är en stor fet lögn bland andra lögner, därför att den utgår från att människan innerst inne är god och vill gott, men det är inte sant. Gud har talat om att alla är syndare. Därför fungerar aldrig vänsteridéer utan leder till att starka och fräcka människor tar för sig, medan de svagare får lida förtryck. Och så har det ju alltid varit i till exempel då kommunistiska, ateistiska länder och är fortfarande. Och detsamma gäller med falska läror, teologiska läror, som hela tiden fokuserar på makt och auktoritet, även kristna så kallade villoläror. För det leder alltid till att de fräcka och starka och giriga tar för sig och de ödmjuka lider förtryck. För skillnaden är korset och vad korset handlar om. Korset i våra liv formar oss och Gud fostrar oss för att rensa bort det som skadar och hindrar. Att det får du ner, som det uttrycks. Överlåtelsen här är avgörande. Och överlåtelsen handlar om att med hjärtat kunna be, ske din vilja, Herre. Och det gäller alla områden. Och ju mer erfarenhet vi får, ju längre vi får leva tillsammans med Jesus, så inser vi att han vet bäst. Gud vet alltid bäst. Vad som än händer. Jag tänkte på det idag. Hur när jag ser tillbaka. Kan bara tacka Gud alltså. Du visste bäst. Du visste vad som var bäst. Sen den dagen jag gav upp och gav mitt liv helt till dig. 100% var mitt beslut. Så har Gud lett och visat på alla sätt att han vet bäst. Vi sjunger en gammal sång i kören. Herre mig själv, jag dig giver. Den heter ju Jesus, vad ska jag dig giva? Herre mig själv, jag dig giver. Du är min frälsare god. Och du skall för evigt mig äga. Ty du har mig köpt med ditt blod. Jesus, vad ska jag dig giva? Läppar som prisar min Gud. Fötter som går dina stigar. Glatt går och stad på ditt bud. Jesus, vad ska jag dig giva? Evigt jag tjänar dig vill. Hjärtats odelade kärlek, allt skall höra dig till. Herre mig själv jag dig giver, du är min frälsare god. Och du skall evigt mig äga. Ty du mig köpt med ditt blod. Det är så sant. Det är det bästa beslutet vi kan göra. Att överlåta våra liv så helt och fullt åt Jesus, Guds son, Messias, frälsare, god. Han vet vad som är bäst och han hjälper oss i alla livets förhållanden och situationer och omständigheter. Fötter som går dina stigar, glatt går och stad på ditt bud. Det är inte alltid så lätt att göra. Jag har inte alltid kunnat gå och stad glatt på Guds viljas väg. Men Gud har gottgjort i överflöd när det har varit en svår och jobbig väg. Då har han välsignat desto mer längre fram. Precis som bibelordet säger. Och från dessa tankar så går vi då till den här videon. Och mitt i allt detta som vi ser så vet vi att Gud vakar, att han är med i allt, han ser allt som sker. Och han hjälper var och en som söker honom i bön. Så jag tackar för mig och önskar er Guds välsignelse och shalom.
Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, Israel declares it's defeated Hamas in Khan Yunis and is moving on to other targets. Mothers of IDF soldiers protest President Biden's policies at the American embassy. And Israeli military experts assess what needs to happen next in the war with Hamas. Plus, rabbis and Christian leaders walk the halls of Congress to raise bipartisan support for Israel. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell.
Here's some of the latest on the military and diplomatic fronts facing Israel. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant says the IDF reached a major military milestone, the defeat of Hamas in Khan Yunis. Now he says the IDF is moving on to their next targets.
The Khan Yunis brigade boasted that it would stand strong against the IDF. Today it is dismantled. And I'm telling you that we are completing the mission in Khan Yunis. And we will also reach Rafah, and we will eliminate anyone who's there, who is a terrorist, who is trying to attack us.
On the diplomatic front, the State Department kept up its push for a Palestinian state and implement a two-state solution. Thomas Friedman of the New York Times reported on what he says is part of President Biden's doctrine for an unprecedented diplomatic initiative to promote a Palestinian state now. UK Foreign Minister David Cameron said Thursday his country could recognize a Palestinian state.
That's long been our position. And of course, as part of that, Britain, along with other countries, would recognize Palestine as a country and recognize Palestine at the United Nations.
Britain's top diplomat said the UK's recognition could come after a ceasefire in Gaza, without waiting for talks to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The push for a Palestinian state comes while Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu rejects it, along with the rest of the government and the majority of the Israeli people who oppose it, as their sons and daughters are fighting the same people who would make up that state. On Thursday, in an unprecedented move, President Biden issued an executive order that targets Israelis in the West Bank who have been accused of attacking Palestinians in biblical Judea and Samaria.
That we will also take action on behalf of the United States, both against those who engage in settler violence and extremist settler violence that have been prosecuted by governments, and others who have not.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu issued a statement that says, in part, the vast majority of residents of Judea and Samaria are law-abiding citizens, many of whom are fighting right now in active and reserve duty to protect Israel. Israel acts against all violators of the law in all places, and therefore there was no place for drastic steps on this matter. The move came as Democratic voters are deeply split over Biden's conduct of the war, and he's losing support among Arab Americans, especially in Michigan, where he campaigned Thursday. Meanwhile, U.S. negotiators are pushing for a ceasefire that could release more hostages.
It's terrible, okay, because in the last time we did a ceasefire, we lost a lot of soldiers after that.
As the Biden administration presses Israel on a ceasefire and increasing humanitarian aid into Gaza, one key group is pushing back. Here's that story from the American Embassy in Jerusalem. The demonstration here in Jerusalem outside the U.S. Embassy is designed to send a message to President Biden and his administration by the mothers of IDF soldiers.
I'm an American and an Israeli citizen, and I am here to ask of the American government to allow us and give us the backing to win this war. Winning this war that was forced upon us by Hamas and the Gazans. This is a war that is existential.
These women, who have sons and daughters fighting to defeat Hamas, wrote to President Biden with three main appeals. Allow Israel to keep fighting until Hamas is defeated and the 136 hostages are freed. No further entry of humanitarian aid or fuel, which goes to Hamas and makes it stronger. Pressure Egypt to permit Gazans stuck in the war zone to voluntarily leave.
I think it's very important that President Biden and the American government understands that everybody knows that the aid is not getting to the innocent Palestinians. Everybody knows that.
Shin Bet, Israel's equivalent of the FBI, estimates Hamas steals at least 60% of the humanitarian aid going into Gaza. UNRWA, accused of connections to Hamas, distributes what's left. The mothers of the IDF maintain the aid makes Hamas stronger and prolongs the war.
Almost everything is going to the hands of the terrorists of Hamas that are using it to fight and try to kill my children and our soldiers.
I feel that we're being pressured not to fight fully. I feel that America, who is really our best friend and has great and wonderful intentions, and thank God for America, I feel they don't understand this, that we need to bring Hamas to its knees and then they'll negotiate. It doesn't work the other way around while they're sitting underground with all our supplies.
The group believes the best way to help Gazans is for Egypt to allow them to gain freedom.
There are Gazans that want to leave. There are Gazans that don't want to live in the conditions where they are now or even in the conditions previous to this war. Open the doors. Open the doors to the world and allow them to leave.
They add the priority for any humanitarian aid should go to the remaining hostages.
The humanitarian cause that is most prevalent is that our hostages are being kept captive by the terrorists. Our sons and daughters, babies, elderly, sick, are not allowed to be visited, are not visited by the Red Cross, and have not received anything from any source that could be connected to humanitarian aid.
As Secretary of State Antony Blinken visits Israel for the 6th time since the beginning of the war, it's a message they hope he'll take back to the White House. Coming up, discussing the intersection of U.S. politics and Israel's war for the right to exist. Israel and the U.S. appear to have increasingly divergent approaches to how to proceed in the war with Hamas. I spoke with our Middle East analyst John Wagi about possible reasons for this. John, great to be with you. In our report, we talked about a almost desperate push by the U.S. to get a Palestinian state. What's behind this, do you think?
Yeah, you know, Chris, it seems like it's becoming the irresistible force meets the immovable object. And you wouldn't have thought that 2 months ago, when the parade of people coming from Washington were support for Israel, support for the hostages, support for the Israeli people in really their goal to eliminate Hamas, which is ironically the same goal that Premier Netanyahu made this week. Mm-hmm. So what's changed? There's almost a desperation in the U.S. effort, it seems, and now they're enlisting the support of the UK.
Exactly.
And it's a push that I believe is born out of the electoral politics of 2024.
Yeah, we had an Israeli commentator write an article about that, Michael Freund, about it's really about Michigan. Why Michigan?
Well, Michigan has 200,000 to 300,000 Arab voters, and they're not happy right now. They want to see a more, quote, even-handed approach to the war in Gaza. But it's at the same time, the Democrats are trying to keep their Jewish donors on board, and we saw that as a problem with the colleges and universities where Jewish donors are saying, we're not given to this, and now they may say, well, we're not giving to the Biden campaign. So there's a push to say this is the only way we can have peace in the Middle East. We'll get the Saudis on board, we'll get everybody else on board, and Netanyahu, you're just going to have to face up to it. The problem is that Netanyahu is speaking for almost everyone in Israel. If you spend 5 minutes here, you hear people saying they don't want their soldiers endangered by another prolonged ceasefire. They don't want the hostages released at the expense of a rebuilding of Hamas later on. Mm-hmm. They certainly don't want a Palestinian state where the aging Mahmoud Abbas would somehow share power with Hamas when they were never able to do that before. The pieces of the puzzle just don't fit. And you're trying to figure out how the global community is trying to make them fit.
Yeah, you know? and they're also sort of bucking history. 30 years after the Oslo Accords, still not a two-state solution. And they're talking about a, quote, revitalized Palestinian Authority.
Right. And for most Israelis, I think it's safe to say that Oslo is dead and buried for the most part. And I think many people are surprised it's being resurrected, especially now when the war is far from complete, even though Israel's had a few victories.
Yeah, that's right. Well, John, we'll have to leave it there. We'll continue to watch this and see how Israel does in the face of this military and diplomatic pressure. Thanks. Right. A new Israeli security group seeks to change the national conversation about how the country needs to face its many threats
and military challenges. Take a look.
The Israel Defense Security Forum, founded by retired General Amir Avivi, called the conference together with Israel at war.
We have the best analysts and people from all the society, including people who lost soldiers, commanders who have fought in Gaza, people who live in the surroundings of the north and the south who have been evacuated.
They came to address four main issues.
One is the military campaign. We're talking about the campaign and how to really reach the goals of war, eradicating Hamas completely, releasing the hostages. It's a crucial issue, it's a crucial discussion at the moment in the society, within the government and the army. Then of course reinforce the society because the IDF is winning big time. And people need to be, resolute and with a lot of assurance that we're going to do it.
Second, what happens the day after the conflict?
Everybody's talking about the day after. The day after will impact for generations. The decision-making that will be done in this coming year about how will Gaza look the day after, the North, Lebanon, possibly Iran. These decisions will really shape the future of Israel, and it's a very, very crucial and important discussion which requires really a complete shift in the way Israel has thought about that in the last few decades.
Third, how to avoid the divisions in the nation before October 7th.
A society that was torn apart, huge discussions. Now we are united in the face of war, and really the big question is, how do we stay united? The day after, what kind of society, what DNA is needed for the Israeli society to really overcome all the challenges that we are going to have in the future.
Fourth, keeping an eye on the big picture.
This is not just a local war, it's a global war. It's a war of we see basically, a Chinese, Russian, Iranian front that has emerged in the Middle East. It's also impacting Africa and other regions with possible wars in the Pacific and in Europe. We need to see the big picture.
Avivi says Israel is at an historic time.
I think that what we're experiencing is a biblical moment that will really impact Israel for generations. The whole Israeli society will change. And I think that I'm saying to people, look, the war will be long, it will be hard. But this is a very special moment, and I see a bright future for Israel. But first, we need to win.
Up next, speaking up for Israel and the Jewish people, American pastors and rabbis unite on Capitol Hill to help defeat Hamas.
Recently in D.C., dozens of Christian pastors and Jewish rabbis walked the halls of Congress together, meeting with lawmakers from both sides of the aisle. Robert Stearns of Eagles Wings Ministry spoke with CBN President Gordon Robertson about encouraging representatives and senators to speak up for Israel and the Jewish people.
Why is it important for Christian and Jewish leaders to meet together with lawmakers?
You know, Gordon, the issues facing Israel are not really isolated in any way to Israel itself. The battle that Israel is facing is a battle that affects the whole world. And the need for Christians to take a stand, an educated stand in this moment as never before. So tomorrow we're going, rabbis and pastors, Democrats, Republicans, coming together. This is an American issue. This is a human issue, and it's absolutely necessary for us to lift our voices.
I hope the UN is going to be on the agenda. It's still amazing to me that no division, no one of a position and authority at the UN has condemned the October 7th attacks. It's absolutely incredible that they can't even call evil for what it is. And then you've got UNRWA and terrorists are being funded on salary with a UN agency. Is that going to be one of the topics?
It's absolutely one of our core talking points tomorrow, because the issue that we're facing right now is we're in this moment that Scripture warned us about, where those will call evil good and good evil. The United Nations, which is supposed to be safeguarding human rights around the world, is absolutely culpable in terrorism in Israel, in Gaza. This is now proven. And Gordon, I want to say, 700 Club has been warning for years that we have got to wake up up to these realities that Israel faces in the Middle East. And I want to encourage Christians around the world to begin praying as they've never prayed before, and to begin speaking to their pastors and their denominational leaders. It is time to get educated and involved in the battle for Jerusalem, because this is a battle for human rights all around the world.